Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Geek Addicts, the pop culture podcast that is a spinoff of gaming collecting. I still don't know how to do an intro for this show. And once again, I'm your host, Bill. The other host is Matt. How you doing, Matt?
Doing well.
And we have a guest for this episode. Matt, would you like to introduce her?
Yes, this is my wife, Cyndi.
Hi.
She's a little new
Yeah.
to the podcasting stuff, but not new to the topic for today.
No.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Oh man, it's almost like we recorded last night or something.
I know, right? It's almost like it was like less than 12 hours ago.
I'm almost getting jealous of your relationship.
That's all right. I've recorded like 7 podcasts in like the last 2 weeks, so
Yeah.
And my voice has like not been working lately because I've been sick, so it's great.
Yeah, getting over a cold makes it kind of difficult to talk too much.
Yeah. No, my voice was going at the end of the recording last night.
You killed me last night too, when you sent me the link to that Kenshin theme song.
Oh,
you
yeah.
were talking about last night.
Yeah, that's so happy and not fitting for that show at all.
No, it's such a weird, goofy song. I had to play it for Cyndi to remind her because we watched it a while back, and every time it would come on, she'd just be shaking her head.
Well, I feel like that about a lot of anime songs. That does make sense.
You like all the Spy Family ones, though?
Oh, yeah.
Well, those are just bops.
Yeah, no kidding.
Especially the season 2 one that's by the artist that did all the songs in One Piece Film Red.
Oh. I don't know. Maybe I need to hear it a couple more times, but it didn't catch me the first time I heard it the way the first season ones did.
Yeah.
It goes like way harder than it needs to.
Yeah, it's definitely not like a hard show.
And I like the GIF in that intro of just Lloyd, Yor, and Anya just walking towards the camera with their giant feet for some reason.
Yeah, that was really weird.
I have a GIF of that. I could actually make it a background on this if I really wanted to.
That'd be pretty funny. We'll save that for the Spy Family episode, which will inevitably come at some point.
At some point. This show's worth talking about, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're going to have to catch up on the new episodes.
Oh, yeah. We're behind.
Yes. Only a couple, though.
I mean, they're only like 4 episodes into season 2, so...
Yeah, still pretty fresh.
Hmm.
What are you looking at?
Oh, just everything.
Anyways, so do you want to jump into our topic for this episode?
Yes, this is a fun topic, one that we all have at least something to say about. Doesn't usually come up in a lot of podcasts that generally talk about anime and video games much, but it's one that definitely should be talked about.
And that is Star Trek, or I'm just noticing now I spelled it wrong in the room name.
You did?
What?
Yep.
Where is it?
I don't see it.
You can see it at the I just
yeah.
That's wicked funny.
Oops. Yeah, so we're talking.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Star Trek for this episode, and Star Trek is an interesting series, that's for sure.
It's so fun though. Like even like, I know we all picked kind of heavy episodes this time around.
We picked some dark fucking episodes for this.
No, I know it's pretty wild, but that's part of what I love about Star Trek is it can hit those heavy topics, but still have that levity about it. It's still
weird campy nature to it.
Oh yeah, especially with the one I picked.
Mm.
But no, this is definitely one that I'd like to not like a outrageously consistent. I don't want it to just be a straight up Star Trek podcast, but it's one that I'd like to, come back to, revisit, do more episodes as we go on because it's just so much material to cover. Honestly, I think we all struggled picking an episode for this.
There's a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it was like pretty. So like when we each picked a different series for an episode, we were sticking mostly to the Brenner era. Not Brenner, Berman. I'm thinking of something else entirely. The Berman era, and so I chose Star Trek Voyager. Matt chose Deep Space Nine, and Cyndi chose The Next Generation.
Mm-hmm.
All three series are arguably. It's so weird deciding what the best Star Trek series is because like there's different opinions from pretty much every person you ask.
I have a pretty strong opinion about which one is the best.
Yeah. But I think that general consensus is that this was probably the strongest period of the series at one point.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I've watched some of the new stuff, and I've liked most of the stuff I've seen. I definitely like Lower Decks a lot, but that's probably the closest to this version of Star Trek that the new stuff has gotten to, which is kind of silly when you think about it, because it's basically just Rick and Morty, but with Star Trek backdrop.
Yeah. It's funny too, because it seems to be the one that's generally well received by everybody too.
Yeah. Like even people who don't watch Star Trek have enjoyed watching it that I know of. So,
well, I mean, because Discovery is controversial just in general. Picard is like you either like it or hate it.
mm-hmm.
Lower Decks, though, everyone seems to like. So,
yeah, we'll have to do one just on that at some point.
we'll
have to get you to watch it at some point.
I've seen a good amount of it.
Oh, you have? I wasn't
Yeah.
sure.
It's one of the few new things that I've been able to watch, honestly.
Fair
Well,
enough.
I think we can agree that everybody who likes Star Trek likes comedy, and Lower Decks is obviously comedy, but it's got like everybody likes either Voyager or Next Gen or OG. Like everybody has their favorite, and Lower Decks has everything. So that's why everybody loves it.
Yeah.
Then you can tell the writers actually were Star Trek fans and clearly cared because there's so many like little references to like things from like the series that like Discovery in particular tends to just ignore.
Yeah. I mean, Lower Decks even references stuff from the animated series from the 70s.
I mean, honestly, if it didn't, that would be kind of bad because it's the other animated series.
True. This is true.
I guess moving on to the episodes though. So, God, the Berman era is very interesting to me because it's like all three series are very similar in style, but also very different.
Oh, for sure.
Like Next Gen is interesting because it's like it's supposed to be a continuation of the original series, but it kind of focused more on the. I'm not even sure how I'm saying this honestly. It just feels different from the original series in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of when you look at something made in the late '60s and then you go to something made in the late '80s. That's a big difference in the state of the culture of America at the time. So, just the basic DNA of the shows is going to be different.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to say because like DS9 is like so like complicated in its story structures and world building. It's like almost a completely different show. Like if you take it to be fair, if you take the Star Trek name off, there's another show that's very similar to it out there. But
yeah,
that's for another podcast discussion entirely.
Yeah, maybe one of these days I'll watch that show and we can do a comparison episode.
Well, it'll be interesting because it starts off being very similar, and then they both branch off and become their own strong shows.
It'd be an interesting contrast.
We
could have a conversation about that at some point.
Well, that's just a fun thing in general is comparing other sci-fi series because all of them do very different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Voyager, and then there's Voyager,
which is kind of just its own monster.
People can't decide whether they like Voyager or don't like Voyager.
Yeah, it's very mixed. It's ambivalent, right? Because you have the angst of it, like obviously they are in a situation and it's exciting because they're in a whole new world. There's a lot to say about Janeway. We can love her, but she's a little fucked up.
Oh yeah.
Oh, can I say that? I could say that, right?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, yeah, she's fucked up. She's selfish.
She's downright psychotic at times.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Like, there's a reason why the general consensus is the best characters in Voyager are the Doctor and 7 of 9.
Seven's my girl.
Yeah.
Not that the rest of the cast is bad by any means, though.
Oh, for sure. But I definitely feel like each show has their own way that they kind of tackle the characters, and especially side characters specifically, and in some cases child characters, where Next Gen struggles to find its feet with a lot of that. It kind of has its handful that it focuses on, and yeah, the side characters are there, but they never really get any main focus. And then Voyager is kind of the same, but it definitely fleshes out the side characters a lot more than Next Gen does. And then you got DS9, where the side characters are all the best characters and have lots of great episodes.
Well, the thing with Voyager is they're kind of trapped out in a completely an unknown world, so they kind of have to focus on the main crew because they really can't have other crew members showing up.
True. Well, with a few exceptions, such as 7 of 9, Kess, Neelix.
True.
Yeah,
But essentially,
interesting.
Yeah.
Essentially, though, it has like the one ensemble cast for the entire show's run, with the exception of one character leaves and another comes and replaces them later on.
Yeah.
Oh, and the Borg children.
Oh yeah, they don't last very long.
No. Well, one of them does.
Yeah, and then Picard decided to ruin that, but that's for another story.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking.
Oh god.
Why did Picard hate Voyager fans so much? Like,
I don't know. It gave Seven a lot of stuff to do, and
that was about it.
Which,
Everything,
which sounds a little familiar.
Yeah,
when I was watching Picard the whole time, I'm like, wow, they really hate Voyager fans, don't they?
I feel like Voyager got a lot of hate over the years. Like,
yeah, but I feel like the nostalgia for Voyager has definitely shunned through in a lot of the new stuff, because Voyager definitely gets a lot more shout outs and a lot more love and stuff.
Well, I think a lot of it has
series, and DS9 really doesn't get shit.
I think a lot of it has to do too with like the Delta Flyers podcast and like Robert Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wang, like straight up just like proclaiming their love for the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I still think my favorite thing from that podcast, I think it was in the first episode when they were telling the story about how they had to go and ask the DS9 staff and cast how to properly shake.
Yeah. I don't know. My highlight of that podcast is still when they call up Robert Picardo on the phone, and he happens to be riding his bike and he crashes during the phone call. And then Garrett's like, we almost killed the doctor.
Oh, he's too funny.
Oh, that's great.
But I guess we should move into the episodes now. So, we're gonna kind of do them in order of release, and that would mean we're gonna start with Cyndi's pick, which is the Next Generation episode, Half a Life.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you picked this episode because you wanted to do one kind of focusing on Loaxana, because you really like Loaxana.
Yes, Loaxana is an underrated character. She's amazing. She's strong. She's I gotta take an arrow out. So she's very underrated. I think that people need to give her more credit, and because she's the voice of computer, so we got to give her some love. What's her freaking name?
And the wife of Gene Roddenberry,
Majel Barrett. That's her name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She also made a cameo. She also made a cameo appearance on that other show we mentioned earlier.
Oh, did she?
Oh, she did.
Yep. She made an appearance. She played one of the ambassadors of one of the one of the races in the show, and it was mostly a mending the fences kind of like extension of goodwill kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because the creator of that show, J. Michael Straczynski, he was actually supposed to make a cameo appearance on one of the Star Trek shows, but unfortunately, a massive amount of death threats got sent to him, and Paramount killed the entire thing, even though he would have done it regardless.
That's wild.
So I think like years later, they had Bill Mummy make a cameo appearance on one of the Star Trek shows as to make up for it.
I gotcha. Wow,
Bill Mummy played one of the main characters in I mean, I'll just say it. Babylon 5 is the show we keep referring to.
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this and you like Star Trek even a little bit, you probably already know about that anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, Half a Life was an episode that revolved around Loaxana Troy. It just a brief synopsis of the story is there's this guy named Timothy from a very isolationist planet. They're having issues with their sun. It's going to explode or something.
Yeah. So
okay.
So this whole story is about bereavement, impending doom, love. Well, obviously with bereavement is old age. So his planet is about to be doomed because the sun is going to die, pretty much. And when he comes on board, Loaxana, if anybody knows her, she weasels her way in there, immediately falls in love with him. And he's really focused on trying to fix his world, or his son. So she falls in love with him. He's trying to fix his world. She wants to be with him, marry him, all that crap. And he tells her later, after his experiments go through or whatever, that he dies at 60. His planet, everybody goes through the resolution, which is when you're 60, you go through like a peaceful, kind of like the assisted suicide that we would have for people who are terminally ill. So before they even get to that point, they would have this resolution. Everybody gets to say goodbye. It's peaceful. It's beautiful. And Loaxana can't accept it. She freaks out. She wants to start a revolt. So yeah, I mean, we can get to that in a minute because I don't want to give the whole thing away.
Well, I mean, we've established on this show that we go balls to the wall with spoilers. So
okay, so spoilers. So yeah, so he ends up having his daughter come aboard, and or she comes aboard herself because he asks for asylum. He's like, nah, I'm not going to die at 60. I want to fall in love, blah, blah, blah. And his daughter's like, you raised me in this world where this is our tradition. This is selfish of you to not give everybody this beautiful resolution. And you're going to go live your life while the rest of us have to deal with not being buried next to you, not knowing where you are. And in the end, Loaxana realizes maybe, and this is big for her, maybe she was wrong. All of it comes to the end where Timothy decides, I'm going to go home and die. So that, I guess it's a happy ending in a way.
It's a bittersweet ending, that's for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a fun part about this episode, when I was watching it, is I immediately noticed right away Timothy is actually played by David Ogen Steers, who is very well known as he played the character Charles Emerson Winchester in the show MASH.
Wow.
See, I recognized the voice right away because I'm like, oh, I know him, and I looked it up. He's been in a ton of stuff over the years. Like he was in the film Better Off Dead. He was in Spirited Away, believe it or not.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Whole bunch of shows. Very well known actor. He sadly passed away in 2018. But he does an amazing performance in this episode. I'd say.
Incredibly emotional.
I actually wrote something about that because for one, his the contrast between Loaxana. I put the wrong.
Bullshit. She's flipping through her notes.
I'm just. Oh, there it is. Nope, that's turkey. Okay.
Those are my Thanksgiving notes.
Yeah, from 2 years ago. Anyways, So Timothy is like calm, collected, relaxed. He's chill. He's so put together.
Which is really funny when you compare him to Winchester from MASH, because he was the most high-strung guy there ever was.
Right? That's what shows that he's such a good actor. But then you have Lwaxana, who's so out there and eccentric. She's ferocious. She's very outward flirt, like very opposite of Timothy, which
like
is kind of like what?
I was gonna say, like, one of my favorite moments in this episode is literally right at the start where you see Picard coming out of the elevator, and he just pauses, and you see him die inside a little bit, and then Lwaxana shows up, and you're like, oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah, just that whole beginning where like it starts with a little voiceover from Deanna, and she's just like personal log. My mother is on board. That's all she says, and then you see Picard kind of poke his head out of the turbo lift, look left and right, like. The second he walks out, she just bum rushes him.
Well, I wrote that down, that he's sneaking out of the turbo lift, and Lwaxana sees him and invites herself to a diplomatic greet and meet.
There's also the great scene later on where she's on the bridge, and she goes, "Ah, there you are, darling," as Deanna walks on, and then just walks right past her and goes to Timothy. It's like,
yeah,
Jesus.
I love that. I love that about her, because like it kind of reminds me of like me and Matt. Like I'm the loud, crazy, overly dramatic one, and then like I would do something like that to my own kid. Matt's like calm and cool. So yeah, where was I going? I don't know.
So euthanasia.
Yeah, that's
euthanasia.
So no, because so one of the points that I was thinking about this, that gets me about this episode, was how Lwaxana says, "Why not just leave the planet?" And his response is, "It's our home." And it reminds me of how like we as humans, like I always say this to Matt, and I sound crazy, I don't care, but we pulse with the earth. We're animals. We all, like, on a molecular level, we act the same as the earth, right? Like, so they're the same. Like other species from other planets would feel the same about their planet. There's a connection there. So I think that's such a beautiful thing that I think deep down Lwaxana understands. She's just, she's, I wouldn't say spoiled. She fights for what she wants. She wants to get what she wants. She's a princess.
I mean, she is heir to the sacred rings of Beta Z.
Well, she is.
She is.
Holder of the chalice of the fifth house.
Something like that.
Yeah.
She says it a lot. But at the same time, the argument that she gives when he says all that about the planet, about how she says, if that's how your people feels about it, then I don't even know why you're trying to save your planet. If it's its time, its time.
Okay. I'm gonna get there.
All right, we're having a conversation.
I'm just saying that part of the conversation we're gonna have to wait. So, funny as hell is when Lwaxana says to Deanna Deanna says like, "Oh, why don't you try telepathy on him?" And she says, "He's the wrong species for telepathy, but the right species for everything else." I love that.
Not a subtle woman, Lwaxana.
No, I love it.
Also, the scene where she's talking to her daughter, and she's like, "Why don't you ever speak to me telepathically?" She's like, "Only when we're the only people here." And she's like, "We are the only people here." And she just kind of gestures to her assistant there, and she goes, "Oh, right."
Mr. Home.
Yes, I love that part, because like she always acts like he's just like,
he's like Lurch.
Yeah, Lurch. Yeah.
I love the part where she just like she walks into engineering when they're all working on the specifics of their experiment, and she just kind of sweeps everything off the table and starts laying out a picnic spread.
Oh, actually, so I found the actual notes that aren't attached to old Thanksgiving shit.
Okay.
So when he does his, experiment or whatever with the sun, and they think it's gonna work, and he's like right there, and then boom, it doesn't work, and he gets so dejected. When he sits down, and as we were talking about his acting, he sits down and he, talks to Picard and the crew, and he says, "I want to thank you for all your help." The way that his voice cracks and the way that he looks, oh, it got me.
Really sells it.
Oh, so good. So good. Like, it's so real,
It's one thing Star Trek doesn't get enough credit for is like a lot of people will say like, oh, the acting is goofy and all this other stuff, but like really, like there's some really high quality acting throughout these series.
There is.
I will say that one thing about Next Gen that I noticed, particularly in this episode, is there's a lot of Next Gen episodes where like certain members of the crew just don't appear. For certain episodes, like they might have a 1 second cameo or something. Because I noticed Dr. Crusher makes like this 1 second appearance later on, and then it's like no lines, then it's just like gone. It's like, oh, well, she's here, I guess.
Yeah. Was Wesley even in the episode?
Was Wesley still on the show by this point?
I think he had already left.
Did he go crazy in the mountain yet by this point?
I'm not sure.
I thought he already left by that point.
I don't remember what season he left, because this was what, season 5?
Season 4.
Season 4.
I'm not
sure.
Wesley doesn't matter. Everybody knows that.
Shut up, Wesley.
Oh, so...
Even,
oh, no, go ahead.
well, even like Riker has his like one real line in this episode, and then he disappears as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, so with the acting, as we're obviously just talking about, and I was saying Majel Barrett's an underrated actress. Well, maybe not actress. I don't know how people say her acting is, but as the character Luoxana, when Timothy tells her that he has to go do this resolution, her face, like she doesn't even say anything, but her face in that moment is everything. It's like everything you would expect. Like you see the pain, the anger, the fear, and like almost that like rejection. And it's so powerful. Like, and I like, again, people say that like Star Trek acting is like blah, but it's not. Like if you're really watching it, you feel it. And her face in that moment was just gorgeous. Like, I mean, in the most terribly sad way.
One of the more comical moments is when when she's looking at Worf's panel up on the bridge, and Worf's like, "Man, would you please not do that?" Like in like the nicest way possible.
And then she calls him Mr. Wolf.
Mr. Wolf.
Mr. Wolf. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite moments in the episode was when she's kind of having her like little temper tantrum in the teleportation room, the transporter room, and Deanna comes down and she's trying to like talk her down or whatever, and O'Brien is like, "Oh, I'll give you guys a minute," and then he like hesitates and then he locks the transporter before he walks out.
Yeah, like little like.
Well, it's because everybody knows Waxana will fucking put that shit in her own hands.
Oh yeah.
Little subtleties like that are what makes Star Trek's production so like very well done.
Yeah, I love the little stuff like that. It makes it so much more real in a way.
But then I was also annoyed with, I don't know, I guess it would be the directing. So I think it's before that part in the transporter room, she goes to Picard and she's like really upset, and she says, this planet is gonna, they kill people, they're so archaic, whatever. She says, I was annoyed with how Picard reacted, because you can tell in that moment this isn't normal Luoxana's overdramatic silliness. She was actually emoting Like, this is truly something that affected her. And despite their like weird relationship, he should have had a little more empathy, sympathy, something, you know? So I was a little upset that like Picard was so cold.
Well, Picard's always been the very serious, like, prime directive. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Yes,
you know?
which
he's not Kirk.
He did say that, and that's absolutely, that makes sense. But it's the fact that, as you know, person to like they know each other, and he didn't give her because he said like, I can't, you know, interfere with that, but he could have been like, let me as a friend give you some comfort. And he didn't even, he was just like annoyed, you know? And that was, I don't know, not my favorite Picard moment.
That's fair.
He's very much not important at all to this episode's like plot. Like, he kind of just exists because like Patrick Stewart has to appear in like Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah. In fact, I think the episode that you picked, Bill, is the only one that really has any real focus on the captain of the series.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the just an effect of Voyager, because it's like most Voyager episodes focus on the entire crew in some form or another.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Oh, so a little word or writing, I guess. I liked how they wrote this specific line. When Lwaxana goes to see Picard, she says, when a person on this benighted little planet reaches the age of 60, blah, 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 they're expected to kill themselves. Benighted, okay? That word, one of the first definition, is state of pitiful or contemptible intellectual or moral ignorance, usually owing to a lack of opportunity. The second definition would be overtaken by darkness. And the way they use that word, I don't know, the intellectual in me loved it, because obviously contemptible intellectual and moral ignorance owing to lack of opportunity, they are a little bit behind in the way they live their life, their culture, their ways, you know. And then overtaken by darkness, their sun is dying. So I thought that was like just, you know, like beautiful. I love it. Okay, I'm nerdy.
So I think to wrap up each episode, I think we should give like a personal rating, like what we thought of the episode. Like, I guess like do you guys want to do like out of 10 or out of 5?
Well,
I like 10. It's an even number.
Okay,
that's what you want to do.
Although 5 gives a better scale, because then you have like an even middle. Let's do 5.
All right, we'll do 5. 5
Okay.
works.
I guess I'll start. My rating for this one, I'd give it a 4 out of 5. Like,
very nice.
I think everything about this episode is very well done. The writing's perfect. The production's great. My only real downside to it is that a lot of the crew feels completely unnecessary in this episode.
Yeah, it did feel in a lot of ways like it didn't need to be a Star Trek episode. It could have been an episode of any show. I mean, the writing is, like I said, the writing and the acting, it's all there. The production is there. It just didn't feel like it needed to be a Star Trek episode specifically.
Well, I feel like because they could have put more, if they had cut out more of like like you just said, everybody else stuff, they could have focused more on the points. Like, Lwaxana has to deal with her own mortality, and you know, there's so much heaviness that they could have focused on and made it an even stronger. And then we could have done a 10 scale. Like,
yeah,
you know.
Like, honestly, like I feel like it's kind of one of those things where I feel like they almost shouldn't have committed to having all the characters be there, and they should have just focused on the ones that mattered. Because I feel like the added like crew members that appear kind of don't add anything to this episode in any way.
Yeah. Because I think Data only had like 1 or 2 lines, and he got cut off through one of them.
Yeah,
like halfway through the line.
Data has like 2 lines. Crusher appears in the background like once. Riker's got his one appearance. I mean, Geordi's got a few good lines.
Well, I mean, the majority of like the sciencey parts of the episode, took place in engineering, so it makes sense for Geordi and Data to be involved.
Yeah, and we got some Worf like shenanigans like early on, but other than that, most of the characters are just there just for the sake of being there.
Yeah, I'd probably give it about the same rating. If we were gonna go into like decimal points, I might give it a little bit of a bump. Like it's definitely at least a 4. I don't know if I would consider it quite a 5. If we're talking about Loaxana episode specifically, then absolutely it's a 5 out of 5.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true.
I would say it's. I would give it a 4.2. Is that a thing?
That's about what I was thinking.
Well, because like if, like Bill said, if they had cut out all that other crap and put more into the points and the focus, it would have been a 5,
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely.
But I still love it because Loaxana is my girl.
No, it's definitely one of her more effective episodes because sometimes she'll appear and she'll just be there just to be annoying, like to the crew, and then she'll just go away.
That's what I love about it, is because that's what I mean by like we get to see like that she's so underrated because she's so much softer. She's wise. She's been through more than anyone realizes. She's so much more than what people see, than what and I mean, I guess I can relate to that because I do the same thing. I put off this front to people and out in public, but really I'm like this soft, mushy thing. Well, I mean, clearly, but so I that's why I like this episode. I think that's why I chose it.
No, it's definitely one of the best. It's one of the highlights, I think, of TNG. And that's saying a lot because there is a lot of highlights in TNG itself.
Yeah. And honestly, any Star Trek episode that deals with the heaviness of mortality is always good. It always hits the mark whenever they touch on that subject.
It reminded me a lot of a Voyager episode that we might cover at another time that involves the Qs and is very heavy.
I was reminded of this episode when we watched Half a Life, and that was what kind of popped in my mind about like, well, how would Janeway have handled this situation?
Well, and as we know, Janeway doesn't let it go, and it still ends up going badly. So
WWJD.
What would Janeway do?
Yeah.
I wish I could do Garrett Wong's like Kate Mulgrew impression because
I love it.
It's great.
He's so good at it.
All right, so I guess moving on now to Matt's pick, we got The Wire from Deep Space Nine.
Yes, DS9 to The Wire. Now this is a heavy episode for sure.
This one's heavy. Like, okay, so this one's heavy for me because, I mean, as you know, I am an addict, so. Obviously, just so that the listeners are aware, I'm not using. But you never stop. And that's like one of the points in this is that it's always there. It can always be turned on, right? So like this is a heavy episode for me. But it's just so real, especially in the world we live in today and the way drugs are just sweeping around and trauma and mental health. Like, you see it all. And like Garrett, for me, Garrick is so relatable. I love him. I've always loved him.
He's definitely up there in my favorite characters of the series.
He's a wonderful character. He's so, people just don't understand him. People are always giving him shade. And I mean, I personally can't because I see through a lot of it. I can see the double life thing. I love him. All right, continue. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for your permission. So yeah, it's basically the general synopsis of the story is Bashir and Garrick are going for their weekly lunch date, I guess. And quickly becomes apparent that Garrick is becoming very frustrated easily, and he's getting consistent headaches. Bashir says that he looks clammy, which I don't understand how he can tell that, because Cardassians always look clammy.
You never question the doctors; they always know.
Yeah,
Clamier than normal.
Even though apparently he has no information on Cardassian biology, but he still understood that he looked clammier than usual. But so the story comes along, and we end up discovering that Garrick has an implant in his brain placed there by the Obsidian Order, which is basically like the CIA of Cardassia. And it was an implant that was used. It's only supposed to activate when the person with it is in pain, and that was a way to avoid letting loose any information while being tortured by the enemy. So he had constructed a device, because he was so miserable living on the station in exile, that would activate it at will. And apparently he had been using it for 2 years straight, which is really bad for the device and caused a lot of damage to his brain.
Which, if I may, that is exactly how addiction works on the brain. Like, it causes brain damage, right? So, like, there's going to be a point where it's going to start. So, like, this little device is addiction, like, in metaphorical terms, I guess. So now his brain is always going to be off. That's kind of how I saw how they explained it, So it's really sad, because he was a functioning addict for 2 years. And now that's screwing up his supply, I guess is how I would say it. That's why he's fiending. He's jonesing to get the new one, because he now relies on those heightened endorphins, because he can't produce them normally anymore. So it's very sad. Yes.
So what was I? So yeah, ultimately he starts losing his shit because he's going through withdrawals. He's shooting up with alternative drugs to try and feed that addiction.
Drinking.
Drinking, yeah. Which that whole scene, we'll get into that in a minute, but I love that scene.
The bottle scene.
Yes.
I love that. Yeah.
So, obviously Bashir knows what's going on. They're buddies. He might deny it. They're buddies. So he takes him under his care. He's trying to help him get through the addiction. He's trying to figure out how to restore the damage to Garrick's brain because he's going to die if nothing happens. And ultimately he ends up getting the information that he needs. And, by the end of it, Garrick is, quote unquote cured, even though it's not really how addiction works. But
yeah, TV magic.
Yes. But that's the general idea of the story. And we can go more into specifics as we go on.
I will say I was very pleased to see the Star Trek running joke of, I'm a doctor, not a botanist.
Yes. I love that one.
Well, my favorite thing, we'll kind of get into this a little bit more in, as we hit Voyager episodes, but I love that that's how Robert Picardo got the job as the doctor, is because he did that not knowing the joke during his audition. It was great.
Why are the doctors always the most interesting characters?
In a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, the first time I started watching DS9, Bashir definitely grated on me a little bit, but he grows on you. He grows on you over time.
Yeah, well, I think him, like the actor, had to grow into his role too. Mm-hmm. Like after the first season or two, it's like he's like, oh, okay, I've made Bashir who he is, so now we can play with him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's very similar with Robert Picardo, where he basically just took a literal nothing character and made him literally the most interesting character on the show,
like the best doctor ever.
Yeah. So I will say how we were talking about how captains in Cyndi and I's picks at least didn't really have a whole lot to do, even though technically Cisco was a commander at this time.
Cisco made one appearance.
He was in one scene, and it was him. It was Bashir healing him because I think an admiral punched him because he was yelling at him.
Yeah, he makes a joke he's like, "Hey, you showed that admiral, all right."
Yeah, it was like that's what happens when you yell at admirals. He says, "I wasn't yelling. I was showing my opinion loudly." Cisco is the man. He's my. I love that the only scene he had in this episode, and it was he just stole the show in just that one little scene.
Isn't Cisco generally seen as like one of the probably arguably the best captain in the series?
He's my
commanding
captain.
officer.
I'll tell you that much. He's my captain. But
he's pretty awesome. Yeah.
So one thing I'll notice is that early in the episode,
Sorry.
it's so funny.
You know me. I was thinking I'd let him drive my shuttle.
Jesus. Anyways, I found it kind of odd at the beginning of the episode, right before the theme song, when Garrett kind of storms off before they even have their lunch. And Kira and Bashir are just kind of like watching him go, and she's like, "What was that about?" And I just felt like that was kind of out of character for her, because like, when has she ever given a shit about Garrett?
And also the fact that she was like 20 feet away as it happened, and then she comes up. Like, you didn't hear that. You were in the loud freaking room. You had no clue what he said. So like, but whatever. It was in script.
So yeah, it went on, and then there was the whole botanist conversation, and Jadzia does the whole like, "Oh, well, you guys aren't really friends" or whatever, and you could tell on Bashir's face, like,
yeah,
no, they're totally friends. They're just totally in denial, both of them.
Yeah, and I love Dax, but terrible of her to do that. That was terrible. I hated that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Dax is a bit of an enigma. It's kind of hard to tell what she's thinking at any given time, because she's just she has so much experience under her belt, just based on the whole concept of trills in general.
Lives, yeah.
So I feel like, in a way, I mean, I could just be reading too much into it, but based on her expression as she was saying that, kind of made me feel like she was kind of pushing him into being like, "Come on, I know you're friends. Come on, like, right. I know you guys are friends. Just accept it."
I noticed kind of with DS9, because DS9 is set up in the style of like it's not like the one starship set up, it's now an entire space station. I noticed that like a lot of the way that they do episodes in DS9 don't have to focus on the entire cast as much, and they can branch off into like little episodes focusing on, say, the doctor here or the captain here or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I like about DS9, because it actually gives a lot of opportunity for the side characters to really evolve and become their own, to the point where characters like Garrick, like Nog, like Rom,
well, it's not so much an
even Morn gets an episode, which is just wonderful.
It's not as much an ensemble; it's more a running like continuity, in a sense.
Yeah, and that's. Yeah, it's done really well, for sure. So we had whole. What's up?
I was gonna say this episode went by very quick compared to the other two.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I felt the same way when it ended. I was like, "Oh shit, it's done."
It's just so tight, It does no wasted scenes in this episode.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And like, except for like, the one weird comment from Kira and stuff, it feels like everything was there for a reason. Like, no unnecessary character or unnecessary scenes were involved.
Yeah, like the way they did this episode is how we were saying they should have done with the episode I chose. They did that with this episode. They just boom, boom, boom. Fact, point, here we go. This is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So
we had the scene in Quark's bar where Garrick is having a regular party all by himself, drinking apparently half of Quark's stock of Kanar, which, being a Cardassian space station, there has to be quite a bit of Kanar. Although I will say, as people who have tried Kanar in real life, it goes down easy.
It does.
So I can't say I blame him. But that whole scene with him, like kind of playing like pass back and forth with the bottle, and Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, like, so he's drunk. He says, yeah, let's go somewhere quieter to drink because my friend, well, my not friend, right? We're going to go drink. And he says, I just got to stop at the medical place, whatever. The infirmary. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And Garrick immediately is like, no, we're not doing that. You think I'm a fool? Like, that is so addict mentality. You are not going to be fooled by no sneaky, we're going to get you in here to try to help you. You know, like, I loved that part because he immediately changes, and that's how addicts are. They're unpredictable, and like, they know when they're trying to be fooled, right? Like, I thought that was very good how they portrayed that type of part of addiction.
And I will say Andrew Robinson does really good drunk acting.
Yeah,
I liked what he did with that a lot. And the whole like going back and forth with the bottle thing, like, you know, versus Bashir's holding it, and then Quark goes to grab it, and Garrick snatches it from him, and then Bashir takes it again, and then he's holding it behind his back, and Quark comes by and grabs it while he's not looking, and then he holds his hands up like, I don't have it. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, it was just really funny, that whole bit.
A lot of visual comedy going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
For sure. That's one of those things that DS9 excels at. I actually wrote in my notes, drunk Garrick is delightful. He wants his bottle.
It's true.
So we learn a little bit more about the Obsidian. Actually, I think this might have been the first mention of the Obsidian Order in DS9. Because they actually took the time to explain it. It's been a little bit since I watched the show through, but I'm fairly certain this is the first time it actually comes up. And Odo describes it as being a more effective version of the Tal Shiar, which is the like CIA of the Romulans, which are kind of like the original big bats of Star Trek.
What did you just say? The fuck?
The Obsidian Order?
Yeah, well, I heard that part. You said
Tal Shiar, Romulans.
No, in between.
Okay, well, let's just move on.
No, it was okay. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, when it comes back, then bring it up. I like how you wrote in your notes that Quark is truly a G.
Yo, Quark is a G. Like, oh, I wrote that down because when he's like doing his little like thing with Garrick, like, all right, boy, I got you. I can get you stuff. And like, just, you know, as throughout DS9, when you're watching him and all of his transactions, he's like a true like dealer, man. Like, he knows what he's doing. He keeps his mouth shut. Like, I would, yeah.
He almost got Harry Kim at the start of Voyager, but Tom Paris was there to help him out.
That's true,
right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I would buy drugs off of Quark.
Well, I love how quickly and smoothly Quark came up with that bullshit, like with like the fabric machine lie. Like,
that's what I mean by he's a G. He knows what he's doing.
See, that's why Quark and Garrick never hang out. It's because they both are way too good at lying.
But the best part is Odo is always one step ahead of Quark, and I love that.
Yeah, I love when they were spying on Quark to find out the details of everything, and Bashir's like, "Oh, you guys don't have this. You don't have a camera in my quarters, do you?" He just looks at him and goes, "Should I?"
My first note. I can't believe I didn't say this already, but Dr. Bashir and Garrick are gay. Prove me wrong. They're definitely together.
They're definitely a couple.
They're definitely together.
They flirt a lot in this episode.
Well, it's been stated. I don't know if you've ever watched the DS9 documentary that was made a few years ago, but Andrew Robinson, who played Garrick, specifically said in that documentary that he played the friendship between Garrick and Bashir as if he was courting a potential lover. That's literally how he was playing Garrick the whole time whenever he's interacting with Bashir.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's noticeable when you watch it. So
extremely,
because they're flirting the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So on a serious note about this, so you were talking about the Obsidian Order in his past, and that's where I was going. ADD. Woo-hoo. Just go back around. one of my favorite lines that he says, and as somebody with a past, I kind of like changed the words a little bit, but he pretty much says, "You think you know me, but you couldn't begin to fathom like me, my life, the things I've done, where I've been." And like, I love that, you know, just leading double lives and going from one place and one extreme to the next myself. I relate to that. And that's what I mean by Garrick is so just delicious. Like his character is delicious, you know?
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of like hidden things, like things that you wouldn't pick up on unless you had seen the whole series in this episode. Like the stories that Garrick was coming up with about his past when he was telling Bashir. I think he told 3 different stories throughout the episode, which are supposed to be his explanation for why he was exiled. First, it was he destroyed a Cardassian ship because it had Bajoran runaways on it. The second time, it was he had let Bajorans go because he just wanted to be done with the whole ordeal. And the third time, it was he was going to get thrown under the bus, so he threw his buddy under the bus, but then he ended up getting exiled anyway. And like,
I've got that here.
Go ahead.
It's always so relatable. No, keep talking for a second.
Well, and the way that the smoothness of it, how he just lays it on so thick every single time, and you believe him every time he comes up with one of these stories. And honestly, I think one of Andrew Robinson's best performances in the entire series was when he was giving that second little speech when he was at the height of his withdrawals, and he was like really losing his shit. And he just, there was a time when I was a power. Yes. And I can't even begin to explain the nuance and the way that he goes about this scene. It almost makes me feel like he must have been an addict to really understand it.
Yes.
The way that he does.
I was going to say that because I don't know if you saw me. Like I had stopped writing notes when we watched this because like I didn't need to take notes. You know what I mean? Like I get it.
Lived it.
But when he said there was a time when I was a power and he starts losing his shit, I have been there. I have been in that mother effing moment. And it's so like I wrote regret. There's always more to the story that starts self-medication. Garrick's performance, or the actor, I guess, is so relatable. Screaming horrid things, pushing people or friends you have away, physical violence, stress. His whole structure has been changed. And in that moment, you see like how he's thinking back on, and like you said with his stories, he's telling those stories of this is how I got here. No, this is how I got here. It's because you have to convince yourself that you weren't at fault, that you had a good reason to get to this point, right? So he does such a good, what's the actor's name?
Andrew Robinson.
Andrew Robinson does such an amazing job in the Star Trek universe expressing what it's truly like to be in that mental state of, like, when you're getting high, you don't give a shit. Well, you may, but you feel okay because your endorphins and everything are going crazy. But when you don't have it, you have to acknowledge, I feel, and he's feeling it, and he has to come up with these lies, and he has to come up with these stories, like, not for everybody else, but for himself. You know, like, I don't know if you ever read James Frey's A Million Little Pieces. There was a lot of controversy about it. It's a beautiful book. But there was a lot of controversy because people say, like, it wasn't true. But when you're there, it's true to you. You make up these stories and you believe it. And he did Robinson. What the fuck's his name? Andrew Robinson. He got me. He got me in that moment because it was so real. You know, he really did a good job right there.
He's such an emotive actor.
Oh yes.
He sells every scene he is in, no matter what he's trying to convey, no matter what emotion, no matter what feeling or vibe. He nails it every single time.
No, 100%.
And then, oh, what were you gonna say something?
I said 100%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, he goes through that whole like the height of the withdrawal. He has a little row with Bashir, and where was I? Hold on, I'm looking at my notes.
Sorry.
So he ends up he's out for a while, and Bashir's trying to do his sciencey doctor thing, and ultimately he doesn't have enough information about Cardassian biology to fix the problems with Garrick. And one of the things that really got me was when one of the nurses says, like, well, we could turn on the implant and that will buy us some time. And Garrick has that moment of clarity. He says, no, I don't want that ever turned on again. Even if it doesn't buy me the extra couple days that I need to survive, I don't want it turned on again. Like, he doesn't want to lose himself in that addiction. And that's absolutely reasonable. Like, I can't even see. I don't have the experience. Yeah, go ahead.
So it does. It's I actually wrote that. I never want it turned back on. And I mean, I guess Matt can see it from a point, like, he's seen me relapse and stuff. He's seen me go through this. And when Garrick says I never want to turn back on, even if it means he only has a couple days, it's because you crave to be able to live so normal, to live the truth. And for Garrick, that is like a thing. Like, what is the truth, right? So, like, one of the things with that, I don't know if you wrote this, but so when Dr. Bashir goes and tries to get whatever to fix him, right? Mm-hmm. He finds out that his friend Aleem is actually his first name. It's him.
Which he mentions Aleem in every one of the stories he tells.
So, little personal note, but I'm actually going through therapy right now, and for the first time in my life, I'm actually doing it the right way. And I'm actually realizing that I call it little Cyndi and adult Cyndi, and it's a true thing. It's this battle within himself, the person you used to be, and the person that you've turned into, and you will never be the person you used to be after going through this. And he's realizing that, but he's realizing that he doesn't have to. He's going to cause himself more pain, because the addiction started, or the wire thing, I guess, whatever, the implant started as a way to not feel pain. Now it's causing the pain. So he doesn't want that ever turned back on, because even though he's experiencing his true feelings and having to relate that Aleem himself in the past did these things, or may not have done these things, whatever, he has to accept that, and that's a beautiful thing, that realization, that acceptance, that taking, not control, but like, what's the accountability? He's taking accountability for his own shit, and even if he's not telling, his friend Bashir yet, he's going to work that out himself, so it's a really beautiful thing, I think. And actually, the very last line was Dr. Bashir saying, which stories are true and which are the lies? And Garrick says, they're all true, especially the lies. And that is, God, that is, like, I'd get that tattooed on my forehead if I could, because that's how it works in your mind when you've been through that. So that actor, oh my God, Andrew Robinson. Yep, I remember. He did such a profound job with expressing what that's like. And I love how they put it in there, like it's a something that they put into his head, and because that's what drugs and alcohol and all that do. They get into your brain and they screw up the chemistry. So I really like the science part of it, or science fiction part, how they pop a little machine in there. That was kind of cool.
There is a little bit extra that I'd like to touch on.
Yeah, sorry.
The whole bit. Well, it's all right. Like I said, I picked this episode because I knew you'd be able to add a lot to it. So.
Oh God. Poor Bill. He's like, these are annoying.
No.
I got to step away for 1 second, so I'm going to let you guys just go real quick, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
That sounds good. All right.
But one of the things that I noticed, I don't know if you picked up on it, Cyndi, but the whole meeting between Bashir and Inabra and Tain was
Like
there was
meeting
so
the Mafia
much.
King?
Well, kind of, but it was a lot deeper than it seems at surface level. Like if you were watching this show for the first time, you wouldn't pick up on this. But us having seen the whole series, we know that Inabra and Tain is not only Garrick's mentor, it's also his biological father, and he knows that. And I don't know if the writers knew that going in when they wrote this episode, but the whole bit where Inabra and Tain does the whole, you should, if you were his friend, you'd let him die. And then he says something along the lines of, I hope you do succeed because I hope he lives in that misery. I hope he lives a long life surrounded by people he hates and hates him, and like all this stuff. And it's just when you really understand the Cardassian people and how they function, with how they talk, the way they communicate with each other, like he was really showing his heart at that moment, like really showing how much he really cares for Garrick.
Oh, that's how I saw it.
Yeah.
Actually, because if we put the theme of, the addiction into it, like, despite the fact that that's, his father and whatever, and they have the history they have, whatever, and it is hard because it's Cardassians, and Cardassians are hard to explain unless you
really know.
Oh, Bill's back. Hi, Bill. It also goes to show how yes, that's how they show their love, but if you put it into New World, like now, or I guess this would be Old World technically nowadays, 21st century. What century we're in?
We're in the 21st century.
21st century.
Yes.
Okay. Fuck.
Spending too much time in the 24th century.
Where I am. So yeah, that's what we say when we love somebody. Like when my brother was, when me and Paul didn't talk for years, I felt that way. I'd say I don't care. I don't want to see him. I'd rather hear that he's dead than alive, because then I don't have to worry about him. Then I don't, So for the Cardassians, he's doing the same thing, just in the Cardassian way.
Yeah.
It's kind of sick, but
I think the only thing he really said that was absolutely 100% truthful was, tell him I miss him, which is absolutely true. Oh, and the other aspect of it that we didn't even touch on is that Inabra and Tain is the one who got him exiled.
Yeah, but that's Cardassian.
Yeah, well, that just, it just goes into more, all that stuff gets revealed later in the show.
I mean, I'm just going to say, too, Cardassians, everybody can hate on them, but I
love that race.
I love that race. Yeah, I like how they are the way they are. It's just...
They're a lot more interesting than the Kazon are, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is I like Voyager in a lot of ways, but the distinct lack of Cardassians and Klingons really makes the show suffer for me.
And the fact that the unique race in Voyager is the Kazon, who are possibly the least interesting race in all of Star Trek.
And there's the Phage guys. I forget their name.
They were they were interesting though, at least.
Yeah, well, they had an interesting story, and that actually did get closed out later on. But I don't know. I think now is a good time to move on to your pick, Bill.
Well, before we do that, we should give our ratings for the episode. I was thinking. So, as someone who doesn't have a lot of experience with Deep Space Nine as of now. I've seen only a handful of episodes. I gave this one a 4.5, I'd say, just in terms of the fact that as a story, it was very easy to follow. You didn't need to know the backstory of anything to really understand what was going on. The actual direction was good, and the overall meaning of the episode was very solid. The only reason I don't give it a 5 is because I haven't watched enough of DS9 to truly have a solid opinion on the show as a whole yet.
Yeah, you don't have as much of a means of comparison to other DS9 episodes. For me personally, it's a perfect 5 out of 5. I watched this episode 3 times getting ready for this, and I loved watching it every single time I watched it. It just, Andrew Robinson absolutely nails it. And like we said before, there's no wasted time. Every scene in that episode matters. Even like the small little, like how we're talking about how the Next Gen had the little tiny cameos of the regular cast, like none of those fell flat for me in this episode. This is a shining example of what Star Trek can be.
No, 100%.
Yeah, I'd give it a 5 for so many reasons, but one, for Andrew Robinson's acting was amazing, but also for Bashir, because he, as somebody who doesn't know what's going on or how to fix it, like he's so willing to go to any extent and to literally get into a physical fight with this guy to try and help him and save him and give him some type of comfort. Like it was, I won't say wholesome, because it obviously wasn't very wholesome, but relatable and real. And yeah, they did a great job with it. And keeping it going, keeping it, you like interested the whole time.
Yeah, it's a very tight episode all around.
And like I said earlier, it goes by quick. Like you don't even realize that, like it starts and then it's all of a sudden over and you're like, wow, like that was a quick one.
That's honestly how it felt like when I was watching DS9 the first time. That's how it felt for every episode. We end up watching like 3-4 episodes a night because we'd always end up staying later than we intended because I just couldn't stop.
Yeah, DS9.
I love DS9 so much.
Yeah, you got to get on that though.
I know. I got too many other shows I got to watch first.
Understandable. But that's the fun of Star Trek, is you can just watch an episode and then put it down for a while because they're mostly self-contained. DS9 is one of the first instances where Star Trek really gains a continuous story. But I mean, most of that's later on anyway. So
yeah,
the first few seasons, it's all episodic for the most part.
No, totally. So I guess now moving on to my pick, an episode from Voyager. I decided to go with Course Oblivion from the 5th season. The 5th season of Voyager. So it's funny with Star Trek. The running joke is that most Star Trek franchises they don't get good until after the 4th season.
Yeah,
which has been a running joke with Star Trek for a long time. And Voyager, to me, is like the 4th season is when it really picks up, like right after the Scorpion 2-parter.
Yeah.
And so I guess Course Oblivion is a pretty interesting episode because it is one of the biggest like bait and switch starts to this episode I think you'll ever like see in a Star Trek.
Oh, absolutely.
So to start this one off, this episode is interesting because it actually starts with the marriage of Tom Paris and B'Elanna Torres. Which is interesting because they were together for a while, but they'd never really brought anything up until this episode. And then it's like suddenly, oh, they're getting married. That's cool.
Yeah, I definitely threw me for a loop the first time I watched it when I was going through Voyager the first time.
And it's like a really sweet, wholesome moment too, where they're all in the having the wedding ceremony in the ship, and Neelix is kind of like the wedding planner, kind of running everything. You got Harry Kim. You got Harry Kim fake playing the oboe over in the corner there. And then you got Chakotay's like basically acting as B'Elanna's father in a way, which is kind of cute. And then Janeway is kind of like acting in the same way for Tom. And it's also implied that they've like discovered some new warp core technology, which is interesting because there's like a running theme in Voyager of they always seem to discover this new like warp core, and it always ends up being like bad and like almost killing them.
Yep.
Like if particularly the quantum slipstream drive earlier on in Timeless that literally destroyed the ship.
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting because like you start up and it feels like it feels like there's a it feels like you missed something when you start watching the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So then as they go on, we go through a few scenes where it's like B'Elanna's kind of preparing because she's going to be on her honeymoon per se, and they're all also planning that their trip home is going to be pretty quick because this new technology apparently is super effective at getting them back.
Yeah, this is going to get them back in like 2 years or something.
Yeah, which is like a hilarious running joke because like the whole journey of the ship changes on like the daily. Like sometimes they're like, oh, this will take a good another like 7 months off of our journey or something like that.
Yeah, I also noticed that the one running thing in Voyager is that they always have the same amount of crew members, even though people die all the time.
They just regenerate them, you know.
Yeah.
Borg technology.
Yeah.
That actually is a point earlier in Voyager where they bring up the fact that like because the journey is so long at the start that they bring up like eventually we're going to age out and we're going to need to get new crew members to keep the ship going. So they imply they're going to have to actually reproduce on board.
Yeah, it's going to have to be like a generational ship.
Like that is a pretty big plot point. Of course, it doesn't really come to fruition because every episode they cut off some of their time. But going back to it now, it's like there's a scene during the wedding though that's very important where they're doing the traditional throwing the rice thing, and you notice the floor is kind of like destabilizing and the rice is falling through the hull of the ship.
Yeah,
which is a sign that something's not right here.
Yeah, we got some problems.
Yeah, can we also point out, this is me, I feel I got a lot of negative here at this wedding. First of all, weak-ass vows, okay? It seems like they were being married at phaser point, okay? There was no love, okay? B'Elanna seems so unhappy. I don't know. I felt like it was...
You were shaking like a leaf at our wedding.
No, but I mean, like, she was just like...
Also, you forgot your vows.
I literally left my vows at home. It was so embarrassing. But, like, it just didn't give me the, like, desire. And then, so Neelix does all this work, right? They get the food, they get the people, the music. B'Elanna walks in. They do the shitty-ass vows. Kiss. Walk out. Where'd they go? You're not going to have cake? You're not going to have a fucking pig in a blanket?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a reception.
Yeah. I don't know. I did not. I was not.
It happened. It happened off screen, most likely.
True.
There was a good line though, where she throws the bouquet and Seven catches it, and she's like,
yes.
"What?" She's like, "What does this mean?" And Tuvok's like, "Don't ask. You don't want to know."
Yeah, that was great.
I actually liked when they're like, "I can't believe they're getting married," and she's like, "Yeah, I would have thought it ended in homicide."
Yeah, I wrote that in my notes too. The homicide.
There's also Janeway mentions that they're going to forego the traditional Klingon death stick ritual, which Harry responds, "Yeah, they're saving the pain sticks for the honeymoon."
Yep, I had that in my notes too.
There was some good one. The thing about Voyager that I like is that the entire cast is so tightly like knit together that like they have like that great chemistry, like no matter what the episode is.
Yeah, for sure. I did also write in my notes that I find it kind of odd that they still do the whole throwing the rice thing in the 24th century.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
I actually said that when we were watching it. I was like, well, not for the rice, but that the Here Comes the Bride was still the wedding march. Like, I feel like that would have phased out at that point.
Yeah. The Starfleet is a very odd group of people.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Not a whole lot of consistency.
Continuing on though, eventually we get to a point where B'Elanna suddenly comes down with like this strange like disease, and like she like dies like within like the first like third of the episode. And then this is where you
10 minutes in.
This is like where like you start going like, what the hell's happening now? Like, because at this point you're 100% you don't realize that like anything's up. You just think, oh, this episode's kind of got an abrupt kind of start. It doesn't really feel like it comes after the previous episode. And then things just start getting weird really fast, where like the ship is like malfunctioning left and right, and B'Elanna is like dying, and then all the other characters are also starting to like show signs of issues. And during the testing after B'Elanna dies, they do a test on her, and she all of a sudden reverts into this silver ooze, which is actually then makes you, if you remember from previous episodes, you immediately realize this is the silver planet. This is the silver crew from the demon planet that happened in the previous season, because you kind of forget they actually clone the entire ship and like the crew at the end of that episode.
Mm.
And you never really find out what happened to them. And I guess this is where we find out, oh, they left. They went on their own journey.
They forgot that they were ooze copies.
Which
the silver blood, I think, is what they call it.
Yes. And I will say, the first time I watched this episode, when I was going through Voyager the first time, when B'Elanna actually dies, and that early into the episode, I was so like, it was like an emotional gut punch. I was not expecting that at all. Like, I mean, we've had characters die, quote unquote, throughout the series, but like, it's always like a big ending, like a big part of the end of the episode, and it's always resolved almost immediately, like the whole Hair Kim thing, like earlier in the series. Like,
well, I feel like part of that was because Robert Duncan McNeil, he did, when he hands her the honeymoon ship and he's explaining it, he did such a good job with that emotion up until she actually died, and then he kind of like sucked at that reaction. But during that scene where he's like talking to her about what they're gonna do, he was so beautiful with that sadness, you know? So I think that's what made it so much more like, oh no, B'Elanna's gone, you know, so unexpected. Like the way he did that was really, really strong.
Mm.
Yeah. And it like going from there, then it starts becoming more and more dire once they realize, like they make the realization that they aren't actually the original Voyager crew anymore. They're kind of in this like weird sense of, they've kind of lost their like sense of like who they are, and they're kind of like struggling between, do we continue the journey that the Voyager crew originally wanted, or do we head back to the planet, kind of thing. And this is where it gets kind of tense, because it's like Janeway, being Psycho Janeway, wants to continue the crew's original journey.
Yeah, in my notes, I refer to her a lot in this episode as Dictator Janeway, with an emphasis on Dick.
Yeah.
No, I see it as, I mean, personally, I saw it like the stages of grief. Everybody was representing a stage of grief, and Janeway was denial. Not denial like she didn't accept what was happening, but she was denying that they couldn't continue. They had to like go back and live that way. And then you have Tom, and he was anger. And then you've got acceptance, and you know, all the stages of grief were represented by different people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's how I like, as soon as they realized what they were, that's kind of what I was seeing from the main characters.
And it gets even more depressing, because at one point Janeway eventually gives in and decides they need to head to another Y-class demon planet, in the thoughts that, because they know they were not going to make it back to their original planet, it's too far away, and they're obviously not going to make it to Earth. So they decide, maybe if we go to another demon planet, the atmosphere will restabilize them and keep them from destabilizing. Unfortunately, when they get to the first planet they find, it's actually protected by a alien mining ship, who basically threatened to blow up Voyager, and Voyager is in no shape to fight back.
Right.
So they're essentially forced to go back on the run, and by this point everything's just falling apart. Like all the crew members are starting to like look like they're melting essentially.
Yeah, it's a very very moist episode.
Yeah.
Which I think it's funny that at that point, now we were just talking about how Janeway can be like, you know, selfish and like not the best Starfleet officer, especially out in the Delta Quadrant. She kind of makes her own Starfleet rules. And all of a sudden now she's like, I don't want to destroy them. I'm going to do everything by Starfleet rules, even though technically I'm not really Starfleet. Like all of a sudden you're going to be rule person, douche.
I also, I theorize too that because they're destabilizing, their mental capacity is starting to fall apart as well. That's why they're making really weird, irrational decisions.
I mean, that's a reasonable way to look at it, but Chakotay was so like on the straight and narrow though. Like he knew exactly what they needed to do, and he stuck to that the entire time. Chakotay was the hero of this episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he doesn't last long enough to really help them, because eventually the crew is just going left and right, and by the time we get to like after so much time's passed, it's literally there a skeleton crew's left at this point.
Yeah,
there's like
Kim.
It's
7.
like it's Kim 7, a handful of random crew members,
Neelix,
the ship's communications array is basically all but gone. I'm pretty sure did they lose the doctor by this point?
Yes.
Technology. Yep.
They lost the doctor just before they lost Janeway.
Yes. Yep. That's right. Basically, like everything's just failing on them now, and they're literally Harry Kim is acting captain at this point, which is an interesting touch. Like he's the only one left.
It's funny. I actually wrote in my notes that Kim rising in the ranks, silver lining.
Not where it's going, unfortunately. They're going at warp speed at the time, though, and they actually get they on radar realize there's another ship nearby. So Harry Kim elects to take the ship out of warp in a desperate attempt to send a distress signal. And by doing this, it basically seals the ship as it's completely destabilizing by this point. And they basically send out a distress signal, and they attempt to send out this one last they send out this last like message basically explaining everything they had accomplished during their time exploring space.
It was like just as logs and stuff, right?
Yep. Just as the ship, one of the most like kind of like disturbing and like tragic scenes in this episode is you see Voyager literally coming apart and floating off into space, turning back into silver blood, and then it cuts to the original Voyager, because that was the ship they happened to come across. And they literally start answering the distress call only to pass through this strange, basically the remains of the ship, and literally they get nothing. And they're like, that was strange. Like, it's almost like there was never a ship here at all.
Yeah.
Which makes it's sad because earlier in the episode, they talk about how like, you know, some of the people are remembering our existence before. And Janeway says something about how we didn't even become sentient until this duplication happened. So it's like, and then she has that quote of, you know, our existence was brief but extinguished, and none of you deserve to be forgotten. And it's sad because this gloopy being, or whatever, they never got to be remembered. You know, it's so sad.
Yeah.
Like it's the tragic irony that the ship they find in their hunt for like rescue is literally the original Voyager, but they're so far gone by this point that they disappear before they can even like make contact.
Yeah, and if they had made contact, and the remaining crew members would have had a chance to live and, you know, tell their stories, and I mean, hell, it would have been able to give Voyager the information they needed to get that same technology to get back that much faster.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, this episode is interesting because like the other two we talked about they didn't end positively, but they ended kind of like in a bittersweet sense.
Yeah, this one's kind of like a sweet bitter.
This one's just a straight up downer ending.
Yeah, this one was just no closure, you know.
It's about as a downer ending as you can get in Star Trek, where like literally the entire cast of this episode that you see throughout, you literally see them go through tragedy, die off one by one, and then literally there's nothing left by the end, and it just kind of ends, and their story is literally over.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings me to my last note I wrote about this was where, who, when, same shit, how, Voyager. Literally, that's what I wrote. Because, so did they, even though they were duplicates, did they carry on in the same path that Voyager, like Tom and B'Elanna getting married, their personal relationships? Does that mean that what we watched before, like, who were we really watching? And this happens a lot with Voyager, where it's like, what crew are we actually following? What story really happened and didn't happen? You know what I mean?
There is a weird amount of parallel Voyagers in the series. Like Naomi Wildman is technically from a parallel version of the ship.
Yeah. Well, Harry Kim, he's, well, I don't know now, but he's technically the only real one from
The
the time.
original.
The only
Oh, yeah.
original.
That's right.
You
The
know,
original Voyager blew up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so that's why I ended like that, because I'm like, wait a minute. So, like, the Voyager that we saw at the end of the episode, did they have like the same stuff go on? Or like, so when they all get back to Earth, what's the history books gonna say? Is it what we saw in this episode, or is it what we saw in the next episode? You know, it's so Voyager does that.
My assumption is that this Voyager straight up just never existed.
Yeah.
In terms of what the people, there's probably a record of the Silver Blood planet because that episode happened, but everything that involved this particular ship is a complete unknown, which is interesting to me because I believe in the next couple episodes, Tom and B'Elanna are just married now, and it's like they don't even acknowledge it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that really what happened here was Kim is the only, they all go to the Delta Quadrant, right? And then he has the situation where he's the only real one left. But what really happened is he went crazy, all right? He somehow made it back to Earth, but everything after was in his head. It was all just an illusion or hallucination. Hallucination. Yep.
One of the things that I was thinking about as we were watching this episode was, so they were clearly on the straight path, like, you know, they were on a straight line straight to the Alpha Quadrant, going straight through the Milky Way, like, so, and obviously they had the faster warp drive, so they had made it a lot farther before they had to turn around and go back. Where, you know, at the end of the road they encountered the real Voyager, who was obviously going a lot slower. So you have to imagine, like, there must have been a point where Voyager ended up on one of the planets that they had encountered, that the copy crew had encountered, and I'm surprised it never came up.
Yeah, this, as much as I like this episode, it is full of plot holes.
Yeah, there's another one that I wrote too, was obviously they have environmental controls and atmospheric controls for the ship. So theoretically, couldn't they just program it to emulate a Class Y planet?
Well, I think the problem is that they didn't realize they were the Silver Blood people for the longest time, and by the time they finally realized, it was too late.
Yeah, but if the whole theory was that if we go back to the demon planet, then we'll all get better. If they affected the atmosphere of the ship so that it was the same as the atmosphere of a demon planet, then wouldn't it be the same thing?
Well, no, because the ship itself was duplicated by the same material, so its environmental controls and everything didn't matter.
That's another plot hole right there. In the original episode Demon, they it was when because they originally found Harry and Tom after they got cloned. The clones came onto Voyager and they couldn't breathe in Voyager's atmosphere. Which leads me to believe that this ship actually already has that Demon class atmosphere going on.
I guess that would make sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then it kind of means that the demon going to a demon class planet probably wouldn't do anything. Maybe.
Which
I mean,
again,
ultimately, it was a theory. They didn't know for a fact that it was going to help them, but
yeah, but which again with the plot hole thing at the beginning when Neelix is showing the like, I don't know, it looked like lettuce and like all the stuff that had been brought on board. If their environment had been, how did that stuff survive? You're right about that.
It's
Very confusing.
It's one of these episodes that the more you think about it, the more it doesn't work.
mm-hmm.
Which is kind of sad because
Voyager.
I went into watching this episode being like, oh, I remember this one. This one was good. And then I'm watching, I'm like, this doesn't make any fucking sense.
I mean, it's still a good episode, but I mean, it's definitely one of those things where when you think about it too hard, you're like, wait a minute, like this doesn't track.
I was really disappointed after I watched it because I was literally like, I picked one that I thought was like one of my favorites, and then I watched it again. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, it was a good episode, and there was a lot of parts of it I liked. I liked a lot of the humor in the first, like the cold open with the wedding and stuff, with the the jokes of the bouquet and the whole homicide joke, the pain stick joke, all that hit really well. I like that.
It's sad though, because then once like the twist happens, then immediately every character just becomes so depressing like to go through because they're all literally like falling apart.
Yeah. Although you notice, like, it gets all messed up for each character that it involves, but notice how even though their faces and their hands and all that stuff, they're all melting, but like their hair isn't affected apparently.
No, it's just messy.
The hair was just messy. It wasn't like melting like the rest of them. You'd think if their entire body is made of the same material, then their hair would be doing it too.
Oversight.
And their clothes. Actually.
Oh yeah.
Because even if,
as I said, this episode falls apart the more you think about it.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the fun of doing these kinds of episodes. I'm sure we'll end up coming across these kinds of episodes among all three of these shows and beyond, because I'm sure we'll end up bringing in some stuff from TOS eventually. And
it's also the thing with science fiction and Star Trek in general is you have to leave room for the imagination. They can't do everything, especially back in the 90s. Like, so you have to fill in those blanks a little bit, like with the aesthetics of like their hair should be melting or the chair should have like that scaly, slimy stuff,
Yeah.
So,
well, it's also limitations of 90s television.
Exactly. So you got to use your imagination to fill in those science fiction blanks.
Yeah, I'm sure if that episode had been made today with the television budget that people can afford nowadays, they probably would have touched on those aspects.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of Voyager makeup, it's definitely not the lizard makeup. So
yeah. Okay.
I will say though, one thing I did really enjoy this episode for compared to the other two we watched is this is one thing that Voyager just excels at in general, but there was a good focus on the entire main core cast throughout this episode. Like everybody showed up and had something to do. Like you didn't have like a cameo appearance that meant nothing early on.
Yeah, I agree. That was one thing I definitely liked about this is it definitely gave each character a chance to have their moments,
Like even during the wedding scene, like every character there has a line that's just like a zinger. Like that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Although in the wedding scene, like the laugh track type, like that was so bad. Just in the background, like laughter. So forced.
It's still fun. Like I said, it may not be a perfect episode, but it was absolutely enjoyable to watch even 2-3 times in a week.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a fun watch. Just don't think about it too hard.
Yeah, like Dragon Ball.
Yeah. I guess for a final ranking, I'd give this one just a solid 4 out of 5. A 4 out of 5. It's good episode. The plot is interesting. I like the twist. Just don't think about it too hard, basically, because it's got some problems.
I'd probably give it a 3.5. It's a solid episode. It's enjoyable, but as we say, if we think about it too much, it does kind of unravel itself, and that does affect the way I look at it as a whole. But all told, it's still an enjoyable episode. It's definitely one that I will go back and watch in the future again. But it's definitely not top tier Voyager.
No.
See, I feel bad because Voyager is very nostalgic to me, but I'd have to do a 2.5 because for the story itself, I love it. I think it was great, but I can't look past like some of the acting wasn't like the wedding. It didn't hit me right. The tone, like the acting and the tones, didn't like give me the right vibes to set that like at the beginning it was supposed to be like, oh, this is such a beautiful, happy, wonderful moment of marriage and love, and then boom, it falls apart. But I didn't get that like happy moment at the beginning because I was like, oh, what a forced wedding, you know. So I'm gonna go 2.5 because I can't look past like the obvious who, what, where, when, why, and the acting, but I do love the story itself.
I will say the performances were definitely very good.
Some of them, like I said, like B'Elanna, I usually love that
Roxanne Dawson.
I can't remember her name.
Mm-hmm.
Was her
Roxanne Dawson.
Roxanne Dawson. I usually love her acting, but in this one, it just didn't. I don't know. I feel like she didn't give it, you know. So
well, she didn't have a whole lot of time to work with either.
True, but Robert, like he, like that scene in particular was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I love Neelix in it, so I mean there were good points, but it wasn't.
I mean,
I can't look like you said. You have to like look past. I can't look past a lot.
As much as people give Neelix crap, like everything Ethan Phillips does is just fucking wonderful.
Yeah, I love him.
Which is actually funny because he was in the episode that you were originally thinking about picking, Cyndi.
Yes.
The Menage a Trois.
Mm-hmm.
Because he played a Ferengi in that episode. Which I thought would have been really funny if you had picked that one. If you had doubled Ethan Phillips.
Yes.
But
Ethan Phillips is great.
It says a lot about the cast of Voyager because like all of them are such good actors.
Oh yeah,
like,
for sure.
Robert Beltran does a great Chakotay. Like Kate Mulgrew does a great Janeway. Jerry Ryan as a 7 of 9. Robert Picardo. Like all of them are just such good actors.
For sure, they definitely sell it, and I'm sure we'll touch on it at some point later on talking about Voyager. But like, how Tom Paris's character kind of evolved from, I guess, his origin character in Next Gen, if that's what you want to call it. Because the same actor played a character in a Next Gen episode who was going to Starfleet Academy with Wesley. And
it's not the same character, it's just the same actor.
It would have been the same character, but it was a rights issue. That's the only reason they changed the name and made it a little bit different. Yeah,
well, like his whole story, like the piloting accident and all that, like it links up, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I was going with that, but
you said his origin story.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Tom Paris has arguably one of the bigger arcs in Voyager.
For sure.
Oh, you're talking about his character growth, kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I like about Voyager is each character really has their chance to kind of grow and evolve. Like, you know, B'Elanna obviously tones down her anger eventually. Chakotay kind of reequates himself with being Starfleet.
Yeah.
Tim Russ or Tuvok. He has some interesting episodes, some interesting evolution.
Janeway's a psychopath.
He's got a lot of anger in him.
Janeway, yeah, she is a psychopath.
Yes, but yeah, I definitely look forward to doing more of these in the future because there's just, like we said at the beginning, there's just so much material to work with, and like I get that Star Trek isn't for everybody, but I do think the world would be a better place if everybody watched Star Trek.
Yeah. You know, we should, for one of the themes, we should do like the quote unquote worst episode of each series.
That was one of the ones that I thought of. We could definitely work with that. I have thoughts for what I could choose for that. And I don't even necessarily think that we should stick to these specific 3 shows. I think we could spread out and depending on the theme, we could throw in some original series, or when I finally get around to Enterprise, we could throw in some Enterprise. At some point, it doesn't have to necessarily be the next one, but I would like to do a triple trilogy with the original series, the animated series, and the DS9 episode.
Yeah, well, I was saying, like, especially now that we've done this, so it's like a icebreaker, at least for me. Having like a theme, because Star Trek is so wide, there's so much. So having a theme, like, picking your favorite funny one, your favorite prison themed one, your favorite cartoon court one. Yeah, like, I think that would be a fun way to approach it.
No, totally.
But I'm sure, anyone who's interested in pursuing these themes can hit us up on Discord and suggest stuff for us to do. But I personally, I think because we all picked such heavy episodes this time, I think the next one should be we should all pick a comedy episode.
Oh, I'm much better at comedy.
We're gonna Captain Proton's coming.
Captain Proton.
Oh, yes.
Awesome.
Oh, that's
I love that shit.
Oh, so like holodeck. Oh
yeah, holodeck episodes would be.
There's a lot of holodeck.
That would actually be good. Actually, I'll save Captain Proton for holodeck episodes.
Yes,
but that's the thing, is a lot of the comedy ones are also holodeck episodes,
and there's a lot of holodeck, like a lot.
Especially in Voyager, and how much of it's in Deep Space Nine?
There's a good amount. I mean, because Quark's got his holosuites, but he kind of uses them as
sex.
Yeah. Basically, half the time they're used as sex dungeons.
Yeah, it's like a
like, remember the episode where there's that?
It's
the
like
guy...
hiring escorts is the idea.
You remember the episode where somebody hires Quark to make a sex program with Kira?
Of Kira, yes, that's a good one. Have you seen that one yet?
Great.
Yeah, I remember that one.
That's I love the way it ends.
When they go into one of the doctor's holodeck programs, and he has like B'Elanna on like a desk, just like chilling there, and it's like, okay, Robert Picardo, what do you got going on here?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great holodeck. Barclay.
Barclay is
any episode with Barclay.
The one where he has the fake Voyager crew and he's going insane.
Yep. I was surprised at how much Barclay was in Voyager, but it was really good. I enjoyed all those. But yeah, I definitely think we should go for a comedy one next time.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. Definitely something less dark.
Yeah, we'll lighten it up on the next one.
Yep. Other than that, though, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap this up?
Star Trek greater than Star Wars.
I mean, especially nowadays, I'd say, because Star Wars is just running itself into the ground.
Yeah, well, that's Disney for you.
Well, I feel like Star Trek is so, they always kept up with the times and relatable to, what's happening right now. And, so that's what makes me like it more, and it's more realistic, so it's, I'm a Star Trek person.
For sure. And what's funny is I had never seen a single episode of Star Trek before I met Cyndi.
Yeah.
So that I kind of fell real hard, real fast into the Star Trek fandom.
I grew up watching it because it was always on TV because my dad would just watch it all the time.
Same. Same. I loved it.
All right.
I loved it.
Well, anyways, guys, thanks for joining us on Geek Addicts. You can find Geek Addicts every Tuesday on the GNC podcast feed. And if you'd like to find more of our stuff, you can find all of our links at linktree/theBarberWhoGames. And if you'd like, you can join us on our Discord server for the GNC Podcast Network. You can find information on all three of our shows, or we can talk gaming, anime, or just general stuff. We're a nice group of people there, don't worry. And with that one, guys, we will see you all next time.
Have a good one.